Welcome to our Indie-Stry chat. The members of Bloodhound Pix and an occasional guest give their no BS experiences with current aspects of the industry for people looking to break in or make their own production company.
So, with our podcast, we also will have moments where a lot of it will focus on horror, and which I know you've written a few, and there's there's one that I even had the privilege of reading, but is it one that released it?
Yeah, no, was that Jane?
Yeah.
Did you read Jane? Yeah. I think I'm about to open a website to do screenwriting, teaching, and consulting. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to just drop some old scripts on there that never got made. So that one will be out soon there. It's called Writing for Screens, the website. writingforscreens.com. And yes, that was a horror movie that I wrote that I could not get made, partly from what I understand, because it was too low budget. Everyone always says they want to make a low budget movie in Hollywood because they're really, the idea of doing that thing where you make something for, under $1 billion and then you make $20 million, that just seems so yummy. But in fact, what they find out is most of the movies that you make for under $1 million don't make back even their own cost. And second of all, you can't take fees when you're working ultra low budget. And everybody in Hollywood lives off the fees, not off the profits. So therefore, if there isn't a part of the budget that's going to paying the producers and the production companies and everybody else really well, they can't afford to make those movies. So as a result of a couple of companies actually read it and said, this is really good, but we can't afford to make it because the budget is too small. For those of you who are thinking, I'm going to make the ultra low budget and everyone's going to love me, do remember do some research on the reality of what it means to make ultra low budget. The reason to make ultra low budget is not money. It's satisfaction and getting to put your vision out there and see if anybody likes it. So yes, that was a horror story about a runaway teenage couple, and the girl, they've run away from the Midwest and they've come to Los Angeles because of a horrific incident in which the girl's abusive stepfather died violently. It's possible that the girl did it. It's also possible that what she says is a demon came and destroyed him. And so they're on the streets, and she ends up in a women's shelter where she may or may not be bringing this destructive demon with her. That's Jane.
Okay. And so you will be releasing that on your
as a script, yes. I'm going to be putting the script out there for people to read because, why not?
Yeah.
You write things for people to read. But yes, I've done a couple of horror scripts, one of which did get made, Inner Demons. And I did work, and people think Like, Share, Follow is horror. It's not really. It's really a thriller. But because it was released by Blumhouse, everyone's like, it's a horror movie. Which means that a lot of people I know are like, I can't watch it. It's a horror movie. And I'm like, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's got a little blood.
Okay. So I actually, for Inner Demons, if you could talk about the script, what I thought was interesting when we were mentioning it earlier of the exorcism part, which I thought was really interesting compared to the normal kind of Christian, what we are used to with The Exorcist, the movie itself.
Yeah, that was one of those screenwriter frustrations, in that I had written the script. That was supposed to be an ultra low budget DIY type film that a producer had the original idea for. The original idea was simply it's going to be a found footage through the footage of an addiction intervention TV show, a reality show. But what if the addicted person was in fact possessed, not addicted, or addicted and possessed? And I thought that was a terrific idea, and I fleshed it out with the intention of directing it myself. And then, for scheduling reasons, when it came time to shoot it, I couldn't direct it. And so they got a different director. And the thing that I wanted most to do with it was, I feel like possession movies sort of fall into a convention of the Catholic version of possession, especially the Catholic attempts at exorcism, because obviously of The Exorcist, which is a classic, a masterpiece, one of the best movies I've ever seen. But my feeling was, what would it be like to explore if there is I'm not Catholic. So as much as I love watching a Catholic exorcism, a part of me is like, well, if I had to do an exorcism, I wouldn't be able to do it. I couldn't convincingly say the power of Christ compels you. And so I thought, well, what if the characters in my story try the Catholic exorcism and it doesn't work, and then they realize that they have to find their own way of doing it, their own way of saying it. That if you're going to confront evil, you have to confront it honestly from within yourself. It's going to have to be your goodness against evil. And if your goodness is Catholic, that's great. But if your goodness isn't Catholic, it doesn't mean it's not goodness. It just means you have to find your own language. So I guess in a way, it was an exorcism as DIY movie. So that was the original script and the original plan. Unfortunately, the director said he wanted to go back to the traditional exorcism, so I've never gotten to make that. And if anyone out there wants to make that story, take it, go. Make that story. It would be really cool to see. I always think of it as young people. It's like, somebody who may have grown up even without faith. And the question is, if you grow out if you have no formal faith, and yet you run into supernatural issues, you're sort of forced to confront the fact that there are things beyond this world, and how would you deal with that? So that was the problem of Inner Demons, which didn't get solved by Inner Demons. So it's available, and I give it freely, especially since you can't copyright an idea anyway. But I would like to see that movie. And I'm probably not going to make it, so somebody out there should, and let me know when you do.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was always, that was interesting to me too when you were first describing it, because I think, for myself, my mother grew up Catholic, and like when she talks about The Exorcist, or even my in-laws are, like it's with The Exorcist, it was the scariest film they've ever seen, and which I love the movie, and like as you said, it's a masterpiece, but there's always that, since I'm not religious, there's that disconnect that I have, that it doesn't hit me in the same way as it hits. Yes. And so that's why... That's actually
one of the things about horror, I think, in general, is you either have to buy into or make use of a conventional mythology. And a lot of people do that. And in fact, in Jane, I actually did that. I borrowed a bit of Greek mythology. But if you're not going to do that, then you have to make up your own rules, which is kind of the most fun, is when you get into a movie and you realize that they're going to create a new mythology, and it's genuinely new or genuinely felt. Because I don't even care if something is new. I care if it feels authentic and sincere. And so when I go to horror, what I'm looking for is either something that's going to be truly authentic and sincere and invented, or a real insight into a group that I'm not in. And that's actually, for me, what I got from The Exorcist, because I'm not Catholic. I loved the sincerity of the Catholicism in it. They made a good argument that it was the way to fight this demon. And they also gave a lot of texture. I mean, it wasn't just the ritual, it was the faith of the men involved in the battle. And the movie's really an exploration of that. And that I really admired about that movie. Unfortunately, most things that copied it just copied the exterior and didn't bother with what the original author, William Peter Blatty, had really written it to do, which was to explore how do you confront evil. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I think horror does best, is to try and give you a real question about the parts of our lives that we tend to shy away from.
No, definitely. And I think, there's been a huge horror boom lately where either people will say the thing of, and then it gets pushed back against where it's, oh, well, there's elevated horror now, which there always has been, but
Sure.
But it is hit more of the mainstream thanks to things like The Walking Dead or other things. But I guess since you did Like, Share, Follow with Blumhouse, and they're kind of the monolith of the horror world, what was it like working with them, and what that was?
They're really, I mean, they are, first of all, they're endlessly changing. So the experience I had with them, which is now 4 years ago, they're a different company every year, and I admire that. I think that is great. The audience doesn't know or think about that, but they're constantly rethinking how they approach keeping their company alive and fresh. But at the time, their theory was, let's give a lot of filmmakers a little money and let them do what they do. And if it works, we release it big. And if it doesn't work, that we don't think it can make money that the big release, carries, we'll just release it small, put it on streaming. And that was a completely fair deal as far as I'm concerned. I think at that time there was a sense of betting on a lot of unknowns, or giving people who were well known in the business but hadn't gotten to pursue a passion project, letting them do that. And that really became more of the business model right after Like, Share, Follow was finished. I guess that the experience was just, they let me make the movie I wanted to make. There was a fair amount of debate and headbutting in the process of post, which partly is because I was really stubborn. My deal was, I'm taking this one chance to do it exactly as I want, and I'm willing to do it under whatever budget and release I can get, but I would rather trade a small release for my version, which ended up being exactly what I got. That deal. Yeah. In that it was released on Cinemax, which is not, frankly, no offense, Cinemax, but nobody's watching Cinemax. But it is the movie I wanted it to be. It was my film, my cut, my words, everything, and I'm very happy with that trade. Actually, an interesting thing, though, about Blumhouse and about the horror wave of the past few years, I'm not sure what's going to happen to that in the wake of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Horror tends to have its biggest waves when there's an undercurrent of distress in an otherwise placid country. The 50s and recently there's been a sense of, we're doing good, and then underneath that there's a undercurrent of discontent, and that's when horror in general tends to really flourish. In times of actual out and out crisis, horror tends to slip back down. I think people want to escape from horror, and I'm wondering what's going to happen to horror in the post-COVID world. Yeah. It'll never go away, but I don't think it's going to become, and this may be good, frankly, for horror people. It's not going to be the big business that it was, which might allow for a little bit more creativity, because the horror that has been riding the crest of that wave has been getting more and more formulaic, in my opinion. because there's people doing cheapies, there's always going to be a cool level of experimentation. But the studios weren't making It Follows. They'll release it, but they didn't make it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's it'll settle. The studios will be less interested in horror, and that will probably be a good thing for horror.
No, I agree. I mean, I found myself, even as somebody who's been watching, especially a ton of horror within the last year, more so than I probably have as we've been doing this podcast and been reviewing films, and especially during this time, I found myself like turning, if I am still watching horror, I'm turning to something that has a little bit more humor in it, and which I wasn't doing, a month ago even, or something.
Yeah. I spent much of the past 2 years working on a project about a little communal house here in Los Angeles. A bunch of what I would consider young people in their 20s who were facing a pandemic which might have been which was being concealed. It was the government and possibly the world government, if there is such a thing, who was busy trying to keep secret that people were getting a disease. And I was working, I got most of this project written. I was struggling with whether or not to make it a feature or a series. And now I'll never make it because it's simply inappropriate. Likewise, I feel really annoyed. This is a valuable lesson to anyone out there. If you're working on something done, good, bad, or indifferent, don't hold on to it forever because the world may undercut its ability to exist. For many, many years in the 90s, I worked on a project about the toppling of a giant office building, of a tower. And it was going to be like a social epic about what happened to a city if terrorists knocked over the Tower of Babel at the center of the city. Yeah. And of course, after 9/11, I could never ever write that. So all those years of work gone. Whereas if I had published it a year before, I would be really, really a genius. So my advice to everyone is don't hold on to things too long. Get them out there, whether or not it's ready.
But I know you said that about Jane, which always interested me, of when we were talking about it in the lecture series that you were doing for our class, you were kind of saying how, like, that even if different things could be done to it, like, this was kind of your ending point, I guess, with the script of saying.
Yeah, and that was another one, and I personally work by saying, at the beginning of starting a project, I choose whether it's going to be one where I'm difficult or one where I'm not. Okay. And if it's going to be one where I'm difficult, I recognize that I am therefore commending it to a low budget, an ultra low budget, possibly just a budget that I can afford to do. And Jane was one where I wrote it to be ultra low so that I could do it the way I wanted. And so you hit a point when you get notes on something like that where you're just like, that is a completely valid, different movie. I'm just not interested in making a completely valid, different movie. Partly because people will offer you suggestions on how to make your script different forever, and no two will ever give you the same ones. So unless they're committing to make it, it's not really, I am wary of doing rewrites, especially if nobody's paying, doing rewrites to hope to please them because then they'll make it. I think if they care enough to make it, they'll bet on paying you for the rewrite. But with Jane, that was exactly the case. I got it to where I wanted it to be. There were changes that I would make, but changes that altered the basic premise or understanding of the story, I wasn't interested in making. But when you make that decision, you make the decision not to sell it. You're making the decision not to put it into the mainstream of the business, because in the mainstream of the business, everything is negotiable. Anybody can change anything at any time. And that is just the deal you make to get a movie made.
That makes sense. Because I know also because of something like that, there's a lot of moments that, for especially people when they're starting out and they're told that they should, well, try being a reader for a bit or something like that. It's, how do you give note, or what's the difference between notes that are constructive for the script that is being written versus, you know, well, this is the movie that I would write if it was my version?
Yeah, that's a good question. As far as the be a reader thing, sure, it's a day job, but I'm not sure that at this point in time you can get access to more than enough scripts to read. So you don't need to be a reader. In the old days, that was actually the only way to read scripts. You can read scripts and not have it be a job. I'm not sure that being a reader is a valuable tool to being a writer, because what you have to write is you have to write a prose summary, which is not helpful. As far as whether or not, I'm sorry, could you ask the question again? I got distracted by the reader job part.
No problem. Just the difference between notes that are valuable for
yes.
Yeah.
I think the important thing is, if you write very impulsively, frankly, take every note that you can. Mm-hmm. If you're writing the sort of thing where you've made choices, where you've made decisions, and you said, I've decided, like, the center of this story is, you know, that whatever it is that you are trying to accomplish, and you hear a note that is undercutting that is trying to change the basic premise of the thing, you probably shouldn't take it. Well, if somebody's paying you, you take the notes. You simply have no choice. But if you're showing people your work and you're getting advice, and people are giving you advice, I think Charlie Kaufman said in an interview, he said, you know when you hear a note, either they're trying to help you to make the movie you're trying to make, in which case you want to take the note. And if they're telling you to do something that's going to make it into a different project, then don't do it unless you're willing to literally make it into a different project. And there's a polite way to reject notes. But I believe that you can tell, honestly, as far as in my experience, when somebody gives you a good note, you feel either one of two things. You feel, oh yeah, I knew that when I wrote it. I absolutely knew I was kind of fudging that moment and it just didn't work. Or you go, oh, I don't want to think that, but I know it's true. And if you have either one of those feelings when you hear a note, take the note very seriously. Okay. If you have the feeling of, no, that's going to completely make it a different thing, or no, that's a misunderstanding of what it's about, then really, really rethink whether you want to take that note. Because unless somebody is going to give you something for the sacrifice you're making, I don't understand the point. What's the point of taking a project you've done and making it into a different thing on the off chance that someone will give you something for it? If they care enough to invest in it, then they should give you something to chop the heart out of your work. And by the way, I have in the past chopped the heart out of my work and found a new heart, and the new heart was perfectly good. I'm not saying that there's only one way to do things. In fact, one of the coolest experiences can be discovering that somebody's notes, which radically rethink your project, can bring it to be a really new, cool thing. But if you are feeling like, no, I'm not going to get anything from the experience of throwing away my own work for somebody else's opinion, you should not do it. I really do think a lot of it comes down to that inner voice when you hear the note. If you're hearing it and go, yeah, that's actually right, then you should do it. Even though sometimes it's like, oh, damn, I was trying really hard to convince everyone that I could get away with this thing I'm doing, but it's not working. Yeah, see if you can think of a new way to do it.
Oh, that's, a perfect way of answering.
Yeah. I do believe a lot of creative work, you have to start to get very good at listening to your own reaction and recognizing what it's telling you. You don't always do what it's telling you. So like a lot of times it's saying, no, I don't want to change things. But that doesn't necessarily, the feeling will be different. If it's, no, I don't want to change it because I put so much work into this and I'm invested in it, or no, I don't want to change it because it changes what it is.
Okay.
Those are different.
Okay. Well, this has been great, Glenn. And
thank you. It's gone very quickly.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it.
I guess to kind of go back a little bit, something that to bring up that I'd like you to expand a little bit more. So, for people when they're just kind of starting out, and I know you said you got representation on your first script.
Got lucky.
Yeah, I know there's like for myself, I have a screenplay that I wrote, and it's done pretty well with competitions and festivals, but it's very very specific. And I've talked about it on the podcast before briefly, where it's body horror. It's very regional. There's a lot of stuff about it that make it very niche, and I was kind of told, not in a harsh way at all or anything, but like it's just something that the best thing that you can do with it is use it to get, I guess, representation, or use it for. So,
a show script, they call it.
So I guess if you could kind of expand upon that and the idea of, I guess, representation.
Yeah. Representation is not what it used to be.
Okay.
There was a time when, just things were different.
Yeah.
At the moment, representation is a professional level experience, and the way you'll get representation is because someone wants to pay for your work, and at that point, it's possible that an agent will want it. In truth, I would say don't look for representation. Definitely do look for like contests and things like that to win, to the extent that you can afford that. I know that it's a pricey thing to do, but entering those things, especially going to things like festivals that have screenplay competitions and getting to meet other people trying to do what you're doing, that's a good thing to do if you can afford it. But the main thing I would say is try to find producers, indie producers, but any kind of producers. Producers are looking at material as is this something I can make? Is this something that I can do? Reps are looking for, is this going to sell? And frankly, they just have a ton of stuff that's coming at them and they can afford to be choosy. Producers are hungrier. There's more producers and there's more people who are trying to get their foot into the business and they need material. So be cautious about producers. Be very cautious about signing any kind of legal agreement with a producer, especially a person who wants to be a producer. Do some research on that, get a lawyer to look at it, whatever. But overall, I would say reps will come when things are going well. They don't make things go well. They come in and help negotiate things going well. What makes things go well is circulating your work to other people who have an interest in it, either in festivals or classes or contests or whatever you can do to do that, and especially to places where producers might read it. Because producers, actors, directors, those are the people who are looking at the script and thinking, can I make this? Is this something I can use to make it? They're the ones you want to get to. So that's what I would say is reps will come when things are happening. Until then, producers, directors, actors, get your script to them.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much. So I guess, after all that, I kind of wanted to go kind of talk about one last little subject, and that is with everything that's been going on, the idea of, like, as you've seen, The Invisible Man, or I think it was Onward from Pixar, or all these movies where they
we're going to have theatrical releases, and that instead are being released on demand for
online, sure.
$19 or
yeah.
Do you think that this is just a phase, or that this is going to be the new standard?
This was coming anyway.
Yeah.
This was coming anyway, and in fact, it sort of was coming since the 2007 and 8 Writers Guild strike. This is sort of what that strike was about, was that everyone knew it was coming, and the companies were desperately trying to renegotiate their deals so that they didn't have to pay unions for this new form of business which was coming. It's here now. The truth is, theatrical is going to be a very limited spectacle experience that you go to most. I mean, there'll be little theaters that show little movies now and here and there, but those are indies.
Yeah.
The actual movie theater experience is going to be for big things. It's going to be like in theater, there's Broadway. And there's 20 Broadway theaters maybe.
Yeah.
And they put on gigantic expensive shows for tourists and people who want to spend a lot of money on an experience. And all the rest of theater is regional. And that's what's going to happen, except instead of regional theater, it's going to be online. Everything will be online. And theaters will be exclusively an event, a sporting event, basically. That's done. I mean, there will be a continuing struggle for a few years to get there, but we've already sort of started getting there anyway. That does not mean that movies are ending. The 2-hour story experience will just be online. But yeah, I don't know about you. I don't know anybody who doesn't spend most of their screen time on a home or personal screen, not on a communal screen.
Yeah.
That's just changed already. So, yeah. There were people invested, there were companies with a lot invested in maintaining the old business, but they've frankly been just desperately trying to hold on to what they had while the world changed. And this simply accelerated it, but it's going to happen. Everything's going to be available primarily online, except for some big event things.
Yeah, and I know from my years when I was working as a projectionist with the Chinese theater, that was kind of what started to happen, because they brought in the IMAX and then learning kind of behind the scenes of that, the theatrical release, how much money it actually cost a lot of these films.
And it's a wonderful, and it can be a wonderful experience. But it's like, things change. Opera was the biggest event, in the cultural scene for 100 years, and then it wasn't.
No, perfect. And are you perfectly fine with, I guess, the shift?
Yeah. I've thought, frankly, it just means there's more stuff, more available. The library that you have access to now is unbelievable. It was historically non-existent. There was no way to see the wide range of things you can now see. The power centers are just shifting to the companies that have those forms of distribution. It's not like they're going to not be giant companies trying to control and maximize their profit. They'll just be different companies doing it a different way. I'm not a big film fanatic. Like, I'm not one of those, it has to be projected in the theater with film. I think it's nice, but I don't think it's at all important.
Yeah. And it's kind of a good story is a good story too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of times theatrical experience is just a lot of people talking and, eating nachos and making it hard for you to hear. So I personally am not always a big fan. When there was only theaters, I used to try and go on like a Tuesday afternoon and have as little of a theatrical experience in the theater as possible.
No, I do the same thing. Or, well, not as much now, but after my experience with the theater, I started to only or strictly go see movies during a matinee on a weekday.
Yeah. I remember when 1941 came out, Spielberg's disastrous comedy. I remember I was like there were two people in the theater, and that was, it wasn't a good movie, but it was a good experience.
Yeah. So you mentioned briefly, though, to wrap it up, that you are doing the writingforscreens.com.
Yes.
If you want to,
there will be thank you. There will be a related YouTube channel where I'm going to be putting out this kind of stuff that I just said to you as videos, hopefully starting in the next week or two. So please, anyone who's out there is listening who is at all interested, Writing for Screens on YouTube, writingforscreens.com on the internets, and look me up. Okay. I'm hoping to do an ongoing process of connecting and communicating.
Okay. Are you going to do one-on-one or work with kind of more classes?
Yeah. I'm going to be putting out sort of classes on YouTube, lectures on YouTube. Okay. I might end up doing online classes if there's interest, but that always requires scheduling. So one-on-one is ideally. My feeling about creative work is you sort of need to do some of it one-on-one, because as much as I might have good ideas, until we talk about your thing and what your particular needs are, it's just theory.
Oh,
so thanks for asking. Thanks for letting me plug.
Yeah. No, and I can vouch for, as I've already talked about, I can vouch for.
Thank you. Yeah.
Learned a ton from you.
Thank you. I'm very glad.
Well, thank you so much.
So this was very, very enjoyable. I will be listening to the podcast as it goes and grows.
Okay. And is there any sort of way? Is there any last minute things you would like to say, or any way to find you on? Do you have social media or?
Writing for Screens will be shortly on Twitter and Facebook as well as .com. And the thing I would say is go follow me on those things in those places, because that's where I will be saying whatever comes into my head. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that here for a while.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bloodhound Pix podcast is produced by Josh Lee, Craig Draheim, and Kyle Hintz. Music by Raymond Seed. Audio editing by Kyle Hintz.